What if the greatest conflict in Krynn didn't begin in a king's court or on a battlefield, but in a quiet wooden inn high above the forest floor? Solace, the village among the vallenwood, is more than a settlement. It is a sanctuary born from survival, a community woven into the limbs of living giants. These trees, the vallenwoods, have stood for centuries, their bark cracked and weathered by time, their roots sunk deep into the soil of Abyssinia. Solace is not a place that defied nature. It embraced it, elevated by necessity and sustained by ingenuity. To truly understand Solace, we must first understand the Age of Despair. The cataclysm shattered the world, flattening cities, drowning coastlines, and rearranging the very bones of Ansalon. In its wake, the people of Abyssinia faced chaos, displacement, and danger. Goblin raids swept through the region, relentless and ground-bound, making traditional homesteads untenable. The solution was not just clever, it was transformative. Early settlers looked upwards. They built homes into the massive limbs of the vallenwoods, where goblins could not easily reach. Rope bridges replaced roads. Walkways swayed in the breeze. The village became a canopy of survival, suspended above the forest floor like a constellation of wooden stars. This wasn't just architecture, it was adaptation, a practical, elegant response to a world that had turned very, very hostile. The scale of the vallenwoods is absolutely staggering. Their trunks are wide enough to host entire clusters of dwellings. The canopy is its own ecosystem, bathed in shifting light and morning mist. Sunlight filters through dense leaves, dappling the walkways with warmth and shadow. Below, the forest floor is a realm of silence and deep rootwork, where full sunlight rarely touches and the air hangs heavy with damp earth. The contrast is constant, a reminder of what elevation protects against. Walking through Solace, well, for some people that is an act of trust. The rope bridges creak with every step, swaying gently even in calm weather. That rhythm, the soft groan of wood, the whisper of rope, is the heartbeat of the village. It's the sound that becomes background music to daily life, a lullaby for resilience. Solace's transformation from a ground-level crossroads to a treetop haven, well, it wasn't immediate. It was forged in the aftermath of the cataclysm, shaped by refugees and survivors who needed more than shelter. They needed community. What emerged was a town defined by mutual aid and quiet hospitality. Solace became one of the few places in Abyssinia where travelers could consistently find rest, safety, and a warm meal. Trade flourished. Blacksmiths, tinkerers, and farmers from the surrounding plains made their homes in the heights. Solace became a hub, not grand, but vital. A place where cultures met and stories were exchanged over mugs of ale and plates of spiced potatoes. The town was a study in contrast. Kender treated the canopy like a playground, their light steps barely disturbing the sway of the bridges, their pockets mysteriously full of found items. Hill dwarves, rooted in stone and skeptical of air, visited for trade, grumbling about the height and the impracticality of walking on air. Their complaints became part of the town's soundtrack, as familiar as the creaking wood. Even they couldn't deny the quality of the ale brewed here. At the heart of Solace, physically and emotionally, stood the Inn of the Last Home. To reach it, one ascends a spiraling ramp that circles a massive vallenwood trunk. The journey upwards feels almost symbolic, a quiet shedding of the outside world. Inside, the inn is warm and spacious, its vaulted ceilings supported by ancient beams, its hearth a beacon of comfort. That hearth, built deep into the tree's core, is more than a source of heat. It's the soul of the inn. The scent of wood smoke and spiced potatoes fills the air, mingling with laughter and the clinks of mugs. Windows overlook the canopy, offering views of mist and leaf and light. A reminder of the sanctuary they built above the chaos. Otik Sandath, the innkeeper, is central to this story. His quiet generosity and firm honesty gives Solace its moral spine. He didn't just serve food, he served stability. In a world that had seemingly abandoned the gods, Otik kept the hearth burning. For years, Solace endured. It didn't grow large, it didn't seek power, but it became something rarer, A place of peace. A village that stood not because of walls or armies, but because of trust, community, and the wisdom to build among the trees. The quiet years of the Age of Despair were nearing their violent end. Solace, the treetop sanctuary built on hard-won security, was about to face a threat no rope bridge or elevated walkway could repel. The village held its breath. A heavy silence settled over the canopy, thick with the kind of tension that precedes history. Inside the inn of the last home, the stone hearth crackled softly, casting flickering light across familiar faces. The companions, heroes bound by a long, strained fellowship, had returned after 5 years apart. Their search for the lost gods had yielded only silence. They came back not triumphant, but fractured. Tanis half-elven stood apart, his gaze drawn to the darkness beyond the windows. He carried the burden of leadership, torn between his human companions and his elven heritage. His heart was no less divided, caught between the fierce, unpredictable Katara and the distant grace of Lurana, the high elven princess. That quiet conflict hung in the air, unspoken but palpable. Caramon, a loyal warrior, sat near his twin brother Raistlin, a study in contrast. Caramon's strength was physical, grounded. Raistlin's was arcane and unsettling. His emaciated frame and perpetual cough were matched only by the intensity of his hourglass eyes, gold pupils that saw the decay of all things. His presence was a reminder of magic's cost and the fragile line between power and peril. Flint Fireforge grumbled about the roads and his aching knees, his solid presence anchoring the room. Stern Brightblade, solemn and rigid, bore the weight of his Solamic code, a moral compass that offered clarity but also friction. And Tasselhoff Burfoot, ever curious, explored the inn with wide-eyed wonder, his Kender wanderlust undimmed by the gravity of the moment. They had found no gods, only deeper despair. Then the door opened. Goldmoon entered, her Kushi robes flowing like memory. Beside her stood Riverwind, silent and protective. In her hand she carried something unseen for over 3 centuries, a staff of polished, glowing blue crystal. The room fell silent, not out of politeness but awe. The staff was a divine artifact, unmistakable in its power. In that instant the inn ceased to be a tavern. It became the epicenter of a world about to change. Outside, the silence shattered. Marching feet, scaling ladders, the creak of armor. The Draconians had arrived. They were mockeries of dragonkind, scaled, armored, and lethal. Ba's Draconians, the foot soldiers of the dragon armies, moved with terrifying coordination. Their metallic scales caught the hearthlight, their eyes gleamed with malice. And when they died, they turned to stone, an eerie tactical hazard that made even victory dangerous. The companions had no time to plan. The inn, once a haven, became a trap. They fought not for triumph, but for escape, to protect the staff and the fragile hope it represented. The battle spilled into the walkways and bridges of Solace. Fire spread quickly. The elevated homes, built of ancient wood, were vulnerable to flame. The vallenwoods themselves did not burn easily, but the structures clinging to them did. Smoke curled through the canopy, screams echoed across rope bridges. The town was under siege. The inn of the last home was damaged, its walls scorched, its windows shattered. Otik, Sandath, and the townsfolk were scattered. The companions fled into the darkened woods, carrying the proof of the gods' return and the memory of a home violently lost. Solace was no longer a sanctuary. It was a symbol of vulnerability, of change, and the beginning of the War of the Lance. In the cold, unforgiving light after the attack, the cost of the dragon army's arrival was laid bare across the plains. Solace, once a sanctuary among the trees, now stood scarred and subdued. The mighty vallenwoods still reached skyward, but their bark was blackened by soot and fire. The rope bridges and walkways, once symbols of connection and ingenuity, hung in tatters. Some burned through entirely, others dangling like broken threads. The elevated homes, once safe above the forest floor, had been gutted by flame or abandoned in haste. The inn of the last home was not destroyed. It bore the marks of violence. Its walls were scorched, its windows shattered, the great stone hearth, once the warm heart of the village, now sat cold and silent. The scent of wood smoke no longer promised comfort. It lingered as a reminder of what had been lost. But the damage wasn't only structural. The people of Solace, those who had endured the age of despair with quiet strength, were captured and enslaved. This was no random act of cruelty. It was a calculated blow. The dragon armies moved with ruthless precision, dismantling resistance by targeting community. Survivors were marched in chains towards Pax Tharxis, an ancient dwarven fortress now twisted into a prison. There they would labor in the mines, fueling the Dark Queen's war machine with their sweat and suffering. Solace itself was left under occupation, though remaining structures were repurposed as garrisons and supply posts. The forest floor, once avoided, became a staging ground for patrols and control. The village had been transformed from a haven into a warning. And yet, that warning became something else. For the companions, the fall of Solace was not just a loss, it was a turning point. They had fled with the blue crystal staff and the knowledge that the gods had returned. But what they carried with them was more than divine proof. It was memory. It was purpose. Solace became a symbol, not of defeat, but of what was worth fighting for. The image of the inn, damaged but standing, haunting them. It reminded them of warmth, of community, and a world that had once offered sanctuary. That memory became their compass. They fought not just for the gods or for victory, they fought to reclaim the spirit of Solace, the trust, the resilience, the quiet strength that had held a village together through centuries of despair. The vallenwood's height, the sway of the bridges, the glow of the hearth, these were not just features, they were ideals. Solace is an enduring symbol. It reminds us that home is not defined by walls or roofs, but by the people who gather, the values they share, and the hope they refuse to surrender. Even in destruction, Solace offered direction. The heroes of the Lance carried that memory forward, not as nostalgia, but as purpose. They fought to rebuild what had been broken. And in Krynn, that fight had only just begun. Solace was never meant to shape history. It was a village built in the trees, born of necessity, sustained by community. And yet, it became a symbol of resilience, of memory, and of the quiet strength that endures when empires fall. The War of the Lance would rage across continents. Heroes would rise, gods would return, and legends would be written. But through it all, the memory of Solace remained, not as a battlefield, but as a promise. A promise that even in the darkest age, there is a place worth returning to. A place where stories begin. A place called home. After the fires fell, the smoke cleared and the wrecked rope walkway swayed in silence, Solace stood bruised, yet unbroken. The village among the great vallenwoods, once a refuge born out of necessity, now turned its branches again towards hope. Here, in the aftermath of the War of the Lance, the canopy life of Solace whispered of renewal and quiet strength. In the years immediately following the war, the townsfolk of Solace returned to their tree homes with a focus both humble and determined. Where charred timbers had fallen, new platforms were now laid. New rope bridges spanned the gaps. The supportive limbs of the vallenwoods themselves bore witness to new ingenuities. Dwellings once suspended, homes once shaken by flame, were restored to their rightful place in the trees. As the lore records, the city itself was severely damaged. The dragon army burned most of the structures. But Solace's recovery was not merely architectural. Its identity changed subtly. No longer simply a sanctuary of survival, it became a symbol of what people, choosing community, could achieve in the face of ruin. The hearth of the inn of the last home, the warm center of the village, rekindled its fires and once more welcomed travelers, allies, and wanderers alike. The Magier family line, already central to Solace's story, continued to leave its mark in the years after rebuilding by taking control of the inn itself. Life in Solace did not slip back to what it had been. The canopy home life had deepened. Markets took shape among the branches, the spiced potatoes and hearty ale once served under the vallenwood boughs regained their place. But meanwhile, Solace's reputation as a crossroads is strengthened. The diversified population of humans, kender, hill dwarves, and others passing through found in the elevated walkways a unique community where differences could meet. The town's position in the region ensured that trade once again flowed through it, from the plains to the elves to the dwarves holed out to the south. Though the dragon armies had receded, those months of terror reinforced the importance of trust, solidarity, and the built environment that had supported them. In the Inn of the Last Home, that had assumed both a literal and symbolic role. It was not simply lodging, it was homecoming. Survivors of the war, refugees from outlying hamlets, and wandering heroes found their way back or onward through its doors. Its hearth served more than just warmth, it served a connection. Historical sources confirm that after the war, the inn indeed was placed back in its proper place. The physical ascent to the inn, from ground to spiraling ramp to the chamber among tree arms, mirrored the emotional ascent to the village itself. Visitors felt the shift. Stepping out of the defiled ground level to the renewed heights meant stepping into hope. Perhaps most compelling is how the living vallenwoods themselves serve as metaphor and measure of Solace's endurance. The trees had stood long before the cataclysm, long before goblin raids, long before draconians. They stood when Solace was born and again stood when Solace was rebuilt. The people recognized that their homes among the branches were not a mere refuge, but part of a larger tapestry of nature, community, history, and their future all woven together. Post-war Solace did not seek any kind of grandeur. It did not convert its treetop villages into a fortress of arms or dominate its region. Instead, it chose the quieter path, resilience, hospitality, and the ongoing craft of living in harmony with the forest. And that choice became its legacy. Well, that brings us to the end of our journey into the quiet rhythms of Solace. I hope you enjoyed this look into one of the most beloved and iconic settings in tabletop RPG history. For me, Dragonlance isn't just a fantasy setting, it's the place where I fell in love with this hobby all over again. And Solace will always hold a soft spot in my heart. It represents hope, community, and the power of people to build sanctuary after utter devastation. So if you love this deep dive, you're in luck. We're planning to cover more legendary settings here. Get ready to explore more of the burnt post-apocalyptic world of Darksun, brave the mists and horror of Ravenloft, discover the massive history of the Forgotten Realms, and navigate the infinite complexities of Planescape and more. To make sure you don't miss a single adventure in those worlds, and even more of those, hit the like button, subscribe, and check out the hype button. I'm not sure what that does exactly, but I guess we'll see. And if you want to see more Dragonlance, hit the link on screen right now to see a setting breakdown on Dragonlance itself. As always, this is James from the Dungeon Puffin. Later, guys.